everybody, welcome back to the Green Malt. I'm Chris, and today I wanted to try something a little bit different, namely this wee little guy on the table in front of me, which is a miniature bottle. I'm not sure if it was a gift or a curse from a friend of mine, but it's a bottle of Penderyn Welsh whiskey. Welsh whiskey. I haven't done a video review of a non-Scotch whiskey yet, though I suspect I'll be working my way into some Irish whiskey and bourbon shortly. But for this one, we're going to Wales, and it's going to be an interesting experience. I've tried Penderyn a few times in the past, though it's not something you see a lot of, at least not in Canada. Penderyn is, to the best of my knowledge, the only Welsh commercial distiller of whiskey anyway. And even then, they're quite small. I think they only produce somewhere in the neighborhood of 300,000 liters a year right now. So their stuff isn't out there very much. I don't know how much to get into Penderyn's distillery, but from what little I know of them, they use the same base as Scotch, namely, barley mash, and then distill it. There's no mash bill as there is in bourbon, but they use an entirely different still than you would see in a Irish or Scottish whiskey distillery. It's a single still system, but it refluxes a couple times, and yeah, it's a kind of difficult thing to describe in words without seeing a diagram of it, but in essence it's just a series of copper plates so that the spirit keeps moving up through the perforated plates and then falling back down and up, down, up, down, up, down, until they get a very high alcohol distillate at the end of it. I think they said 92% on their website is what their spirit comes out of the still at, so it's very high, and it's supposed to be very clean by their description. I don't know how I feel about that, but we'll see. I also never seen an age statement whiskey out of Penderyn. I don't know if they release them commercially. This little guy certainly isn't. Incidentally, this one is the O'r Cymru, and I'm sure I butchered that Welsh pronunciation, release of Penderyn, so that's Welsh Gold. It's aged in bourbon and Madeira casks. So all of, as I understand it at least, virtually all of, I shouldn't say all, because I know they do a Portwood release as well, but I believe nearly all of Penderyn's releases are aged first in bourbon casks that are sourced largely from Buffalo Trace, so that's great because I love Buffalo Trace whiskey. And then they finish it in Madeira casks. So Madeira is a very, very sweet fortified dessert wine, and I don't know how I feel about whiskey being aged in something that sweet, because I don't love sweet wine, so we'll see. Otherwise, it says nothing about filtering or coloring on this enormous bottle. It's also bottled at 46%, so it is possible that it's unfiltered, but nope. But there you go, as you would think. Non-chill filter. Nothing about color, mind you, but it's very pale, so I'd be shocked if there was too terribly much color in it. Okay, so non-chill filtered, probably not colored, bottled at 46%. Single malt Madeira finish, so let's see. Incidentally, because this is a non-age statement whiskey, and I have no idea how old it actually is, I poured it into a glass to let it sit for a while and hopefully mellow out a bit. And I was doing a little bit of sniffing and tasting, although not much, because I don't have much to spare, before I turned the yield camera on, and man, it is alcohol forward. I mean, that's what grabs you. It picks you up and slaps you around a little bit initially on the nose. Very, very alcohol-y, very young smelling, very sweet smelling. Yeah, man, this needs water. I'm struggling to get a whole lot off of the nose as it is, because it's just punching me in the face with the alcohol and the sweetness. I mean, it's honeyed. You might be able to make an argument for some vanilla, a little bit of fresh fruit or something in there, but it's tough. It's tough. So let's see what this does for it. Well, yeah, as expected, it's immediately more subdued. I don't know if there's much more popping out of it now. It might take a moment. Okay. Yeah, a little bit more fruitiness to it. Still that super sweet honeyed toffee note, and that vanilla is there, yeah. Maybe some apple and peach. It's just so, muddled. Yeah. Actually, it kind of reminds me a little bit of what I said when I was trying to review the Glenfiddich 12-year-old. Tough to pick out. The only difference is, whereas the Glenfiddich 12 is like super easy on the nose and super light on the palate and all of that, this is much more aggressive, and I can only assume it's the youth of it, right? Anyway, let's see. You know what? As I said, I don't have a lot of experience with this particular Penderyn release. Tiny bottle, I don't want to blast through it in case I need to, do a few of these. So I don't have a lot of experience. I'm kind of speaking off the top of my head as I go with this one. And you know what? It's actually better than I would have expected on the palate, given what I was experiencing on the nose. Certainly the water helps a little bit with that. Sitting in the glass a little bit helps with that, but I was expecting it to be much more aggressive with the alcohol. It's not bad. Very sweet though. Still very, very sweet. And that's what I'm kind of struggling to get past right now, is that honeyed toffee note that is just stuck to my tongue at the moment. It's not really allowing much else through. Mm. Hmm. Yeah. So super sweet. I mean, it's easy drinking actually. If you like super sweet liqueurs, um, if you're not big on whiskey, you don't like peat, you don't like, although, hell, if you don't like whiskey, I don't know why you'd be watching a whiskey review, but for recommendations for others that you might know that don't like whiskey, something like this might not be a bad shot at it. Um, what's a comparable? Glavar, maybe, for anyone that's tried that, a whiskey liqueur. I'm struggling to put words to the tasting notes on this because the sweetness is just so overpowering. Maybe I'll try a little bit more water, see if it helps mute it a little bit. I'm not a guy that puts a ton of water in whiskey in general. Whoops. But this one I think could benefit. There's definitely a fresh fruit note there. A little bit, something a little bit tropical. I don't know if it's cantaloupe. I don't know if it's pear and apple. You know, there's a grassiness there too. It's kind of hanging out in the underbrush. Okay, let's break this down a little bit. I know I've been hemming and hawing on it while I'm trying to put some words to sensations. So I've said about 18 times now that it's super sweet. I don't think I want to bang that drum anymore. There are notes of vanilla in there that would come off of the bourbon casks, so I'm not surprised by that. There's a little bit of chocolatey, milk chocolatey, sweeter chocolate notes going on in the background. That tropical sense of a tropical fruit in there too. And this is what I'm struggling with a little bit, is what is that? And again, like the Glenfiddich, I find it not so much as muted as I did with the Glenfiddich, but so overpowered by the honeyed toffee sweetness that I'm struggling to name it. But you know what? Let's say something like a fresh cantaloupe, pear, apple, maybe even a green grape type of note there. And then, like I said, there's a surprising little bit of a bitter grassiness that is coming through the more that I sip this. And the finish, I mean, the finish isn't short, but it's not particularly interesting either. It's just like from arrival right through the end of the experience and the finish, it's just sweet, all sweet. And as I said, I'm not a particularly fond guy when it comes to sweetness, so I don't know how I feel about that. I don't know. I was coming into this not particularly expectant because, as I said, I've had a few Penderyn releases in the past. Largely when I was over in the UK last year, I had a chance to try a few. And I actually tried one of their Madeira cask releases that I liked more than I expected to. It was also a non-age statement release. It wasn't the same release as this. And then I tried some of their other finishes as well, including the Portwood, which I thought was a little bit new. But that is to say, I find them hit and miss right now. They're still a very young distillery. I think they've only been around for 20 odd years, since the 90s, and extraordinarily small until recently. So maybe as we come forward, since they've now installed, as I understand it, some newer, more traditional stills and are trying to experiment a little bit more with their practices and methodologies, maybe we'll see something that's a little bit more traditional. Maybe we'll see some age statement whiskey coming down the pipe in the coming years, and I think that would be an interesting thing to try. But as it stands right now, I don't know how much this one interests me. It's not sold here in Canada, or at least not in Ontario right now, so I can't put a price to it. I can't really put a comparable to it. But, you know, based on the very little research I did and the price points that they seem to be putting this up at in the UK market, I don't think they could compete with the Glenlivets or the Glenfiddichs in their entry-level price range. And if you're not competing with that price range at sort of what this has to offer, I don't know if you're going to really succeed that well. So yeah, I actually don't enjoy it as much as I did the Glenfiddich 12, so I think I have to price it below that, or score it rather below that. Something like a 76 maybe. I don't want to put it below a 75 because I think a 75, once you get under that, I wouldn't touch it. And this, you know, it's not objectionable. It's perfectly fine. Actually, a little bit more easy drinking than I would have expected off the nose, but it's just such a one-trick pony from what I can get off of it. And it doesn't speak to me as a consumer. It doesn't speak to me as a whiskey enthusiast. So, not something I'm particularly interested in having around much longer, but try anything once, especially something as unique as Welsh whiskey. You don't see it, so why not? I mean, from that perspective, if you have a friend that has tried every whiskey under the sun and hasn't had a Welsh whiskey, it's worth a shot. You could do worse. I don't think it's going to be particularly expensive for you if you can get your hands on a bottle of Penderyn, but I wouldn't have too high hopes for it. So, with that ringing endorsement, I'll ponder what to do with the rest of this bottle and come back to you next time. Cheers.